Hey folks, this is Tron Games and welcome to Total War Warhammer 3. Today we're going to look at Skarbrand and just kind of a quick getting started guide with this faction. So Khorne has a very interesting campaign mechanic, um, and there's kind of two of them that go together. The first is called Bloodletting, and then the second is their raising mechanic. So what we'll do here is you start off with one of these Blood Reapers, put the Blood Reaper into Skarbrand's army, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go and attack the top knot. So this is what I would recommend doing to start with, and we'll talk a little bit about a couple things here. So one of the things with Khorne is that you really want to focus on fighting with Skarbrand and keeping his battle active, because the more battle victories that you get, basically the more benefits that your faction gets. And so the more that Skarbrand fights, basically the better off the faction is. And so you have a few options here. You can get skulls, which we'll talk about in a second, replenishment, favor. One thing about the faction Khorne that happens early on, especially, is you tend to struggle a little bit with money. So start with that, and then we'll go through a couple of the kind of core mechanics of Khorne. So one, you can see I'm in foreign territory and I'm getting replenishment. So that's really kind of a main thing for Khorne. You also have the ability to go into the demonic portal stance and actually recruit troops. So if I try to recruit here, I can't, but if I go into this, I can recruit from the global pot, and so we could start recruiting units there. What we want to look for specifically is a couple of their campaign mechanics, and so we'll go to this. Is one, I talked about this, that the armies replenishing foreign territory. They have poor diplomatic relations with other Khorne factions, but you get additional campaign movement after raising a settlement. And so that's important for moving around with Khorne. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to recruit a couple of additional units just to illustrate something on the next turn. And then I'm going to actually go and upgrade this because I want to be able to recruit a hero from there. So that's kind of your very initial setup with Khorne. You can see a little bit away from this settlement, but that's okay. You start off at war with just the top knots, and so the top knots are kind of located in, they start right here and they kind of go off into this direction. And so one of your kind of initial goals is to get rid of the top knots, but Khorne's starting position is honestly kind of poor. There's quite a few fairly dangerous factions close. There are dwarves down this way. There are Skaven and more orcs up over this direction. So there are some dangerous factions close to Khorne, but overall, starting position isn't terrible because there's kind of, a few ways to this settlement. And Khorne functions best when you don't have a huge number of settlements to start with. You don't want to focus at the beginning of the Khorne campaign on expanding settlements. What you do want to focus on is just continuing to fight as much as possible, because Khorne has two mechanics that benefit from this. One is their corruption, so you can see that they have corruption mechanics, and these corruption mechanics actually cause attrition to enemy armies, so raising corruption is a really good thing. And basically you're going to increase the amount of corruption that areas experience just by continuing to be in those areas. And one thing that you're going to see me do here is I want this army, because I'm constantly going to be trying to fight battles with it, to have as much mobility and as much replenishment as possible. So here you can see a few different options. The one that I'm going to go with is this. to start with. And then we'll just go look at a couple of other core mechanics for Khorne. So one is the Unholy Manifestations. Basically, the more Khorne corruption you get, the more kind of options you get to perform these. But there's also a section of this called the Great Game, which is your Chaos God can achieve ascendancy, and so what you'll find is that occasionally other factions like Tzeentch or Slaanesh will gain ascendancy in the Great Game, and basically when other factions have it, you don't. If you do have it, there's certain benefits. Khorne also has this mechanic for skulls, and you can actually spend the skulls to activate basically this skull throne option here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this where it is because it says -1 for all buildings, campaign movement range, increased post-battle loot, and it gives you additional blood host units. So if you look at this here, you can see most of the income is coming from the background income. So Khorne just doesn't have a lot of buildings that give it income. If you look in the building browser, you can see most of the income is pretty minimal, which basically means you want to fight as much as possible. So what we'll do to start with here is have a look at the victory conditions too. So one of the things with Khorne is that you want to win the Slaughter and Carnage quest battle, and you basically just want to go around occupying, looting, raising, sacking settlements. That is your first short campaign victory condition. It unlocks a really, really good weapon for Skarbrand. Later on, the faction you want to try to destroy is Slaanesh, and Slaanesh actually starts off like a long ways away. So they actually start off over in this area. So we don't really care about that victory condition at this point because Slaanesh is just so far away. Initial goals for Khorne include kind of leveling this settlement up. This is going to be your main base. It is a major settlement. It's good to focus on that. But also just slamming through as many different factions in this area. You want to pick whoever's the weakest. Obviously you start with the top nuts because you're already at war with them. But just continue to fight as much as possible. So we'll advance the turn here, and while that's going, basically Skarbrand has a couple of important kind of lord traits. His recruitment cost is quite a bit cheaper than everybody else's, so if you can recruit with him and pass the units off to different lords, you can save a little bit of money that way, and he gets increased movement after winning battles. So basically the more battles you win with Skarbrand, the kind of more you can move and the more battles you can fight, and you can keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting. For Khorne's campaign specifically, taking territory really doesn't mean that much to start with. Khorne also has a mechanic where you actually can go into here and you can see this. It says plus 5% chance to automatically colonize ruined regions and provinces at turn start. And so that is one of the main mechanics, and it means that effectively colonizing and occupying settlements is kind of a bit of an afterthought. So here we're going to attack this settlement, and again I'll just resolve this, get some skulls, and then here you have a few options. So you can occupy, sack, perform your blood for the blood god or skulls for the skull throne. This basically means you get 1,000 skulls and the settlement is burned down. This means something slightly different. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to sack the settlement because you want to keep Khorne fighting as much as possible. So we're going to sack that. We get replenishment in this region. And we want to just add... we're probably okay with the units we have here. So we'll stack them up to keep our money a little bit more full. And again, because you want to keep Khorne fighting, building replenishment rate is really good. And with that, this settlement over here still's got a few turns to go, and we can move on one more time. The main thing with Khorne's initial army too, and his army at the start of this campaign just in general, is that it's mostly melee units. And that's kind of both an advantage and a disadvantage. If you pick fights with factions that have lots of other melee units, then you just have to make sure your units are better than theirs. But if you pick fights with factions that have a lot of ranged units or have quick units, it can be a bit of a pain. So you want to pay attention to that. And really, keeping Skarbrand fighting is one of the most important campaign mechanics for this group. Because basically the more that you get, you can see it reduces the upkeep, meaning you make more money, it increases the corruption, increases your replenishment, increases your growth across your whole faction. And so keeping Khorne satisfied with lots of skulls and lots of blood is very important. And we'll fight this here, and then we'll actually do blood for the blood god. So this is really important. Now, we're going to do this here, and you're going to see we burned the settlement down, and another army has actually spawned. This is a really crucial campaign mechanic for Khorne. The thing with this army is that it is actually only going to last for 4 turns. I want to keep Khorne fighting, so I'm going to start bringing him over here, because I want to send him this direction. And this army here, I think I'm going to try to take back over to this settlement. This is kind of a top-notch settlement that isn't really close to anything else, and so it's a perfect place to take an army that has a group that doesn't really necessarily need to be leveled up, because it only is going to last for 4 turns. That's a really important campaign mechanic, because it does mean that you can throw that army. You can see that that army doesn't appear up in the lords up here. So we want to just keep throwing that army against settlements and fighting battles with it, because these are effectively disposable troops. The problem with it is that they do actually draw upkeep, so you have to be very careful with your income, because it's very easy to go into the red with the Khorne faction. And so we'll just keep going along here for a bit. Keeping Khorne happy by fighting lots and lots of battles is your main goal. Like, I could have occupied or colonized this settlement, but there's no point, because the corruption's a little bit low. We want to, again, keeping him happy by giving him more and more battles to fight. Now, a couple of factions that you want to be particularly wary of are the dwarves. So the dwarves down to the south, they don't like you. They likely will declare war on you quite quickly. If we go into here, you can see lots of those orc factions don't like you, but we haven't even met the dwarf faction, and when we do, they probably will almost immediately declare war on us. They really don't like us. They're not happy about our existence, basically. So we want to go there with this army, and we want to take Khorne over this direction here. So I'm just going to move them to there so I can see. Alright, they've already kind of got an army forming. So I am just going to make sure I recruit a couple more troops here. And just keeping an eye on how much income we have, because we don't have very much. Actually, a couple of these, and we'll basically have used up our section there. Now, one other thing we could have done early is we could have done skulls for the Skull Throne. That would have increased the power of this army. I tend to like to wait on using skulls for the Skull Throne until you upgrade this settlement to level 3, because you have more buildings to upgrade at that point. One other little mechanic that Khorne has is you actually have 2 settlement building trees, and you can jump back and forth between them. So I could actually spend money and build this. This one here decreases the cost of military recruitment and kind of improves your defense in this region, whereas this one actually improves the corruption and makes building these buildings cheaper. And so you can see just a few minor things. This one gives slightly less growth, this one gives slightly more growth. So for recruiting units, this is a good one to use off the bat. Later on, you might want to switch over to this one too. So that's all I've really got for this one. Again, you want to keep Khorne happy by continuing to fight. You want to get this bloodletting stacked as high as you can, as quickly as you can, because it helps you grow your provinces, it keeps costs down, and it just makes him corrupt everything that much quicker. Khorne's a really powerful lord, especially once you get him leveled up, and basically the more fights you get into, the more he's going to level up. So if you like the content, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel for more in the future. Thanks for watching.